Any more argument from counsel on the last issue?
Just briefly, if I could.
I'm really going to ask from the defense.
Okay.
Yes, Judge, thank you. The state opened the door to this kind of information because they went into, with this witness at some length, about her interactions with Mr. Zimmerman in getting the program set up, talked about emails, talked about phone calls, and talked, in fact, about the do's and don'ts and the specific conversations. I think this, by virtue of the state introducing that part of this witness's interaction, they've opened the door to communications that Mr. Zimmerman had with the Sanford Police Department, where he complimented this witness, where he thanked her, where he thanked the police chief, and it's certainly appropriate. It's not self-serving in the traditional sense of what we're talking about. And from an admissibility standpoint, it's clearly a business record. It was provided through the emails we got in discovery.
Okay, thank you. Response?
Judge, just briefly, I think this is akin to Ms. Dorval hearing a conversation. For example, hearing the defendant talk to Chief Lee and then hearing Chief Lee talk to or forward it to someone else. So I just, you know, if we think about it in those terms, that she overheard something, it's sort of like electronic overhearing, her being forwarded this chain of emails. So I would submit it's hearsay, and certainly the email from Chief Lee to the defendant is self-serving.
Okay, the objection is sustained. Exhibit A will not come in at this time. Let's go ahead and bring the jury in.
Jurors are present, Your Honor.
Please be seated. Mr. West, you may continue.
Good morning again.
Morning.
Ms. Dorval, do you still have the document in front of you that we talked about earlier, Defendant A, for identification?
No, I believe the clerk removed it from...
Of the... Thank you.
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
I'm not going to ask you any questions about the content, but just to get an idea specifically, this document is an email from Bill Lee. Is that correct?
Okay, sustained.
I'll try it a different way. Do you remember if you got a copy of this email?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So you had seen it before today?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Guy, you direct?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Ms. Dorval, did you tell the defendant at that meeting or at any other time that he should call the police if he sees somebody walking home in the rain?
We talk about suspicious activity and suspicious persons. Not those exact words, no.
Okay, was it discussed that people who walk in the rain are suspicious?
No.
You mentioned that, you mentioned the citizens on patrol.
Yes.
That's a more intense involvement for citizens with the sheriff's office or the police department?
It's very different, and that there's been some confusion about it. But the Citizen on Patrol is a police program that we coordinate in the police department. We do background checks and everything else. It's completely different from a community neighborhood watch where community volunteers are part of. So it's completely different.
What led you to recommend the defendant into that program?
What led me to recommend him was just because of his demeanor, the way he interacted with me, his high interest in being involved in his community and wanting to be a part of the city of Sanford community.
And you gained that just from your brief interaction with him, both at the meeting and the few contacts you had prior to the meeting?
I gained that from the meeting, the phone calls, and the emails.
All right, you also asked questions about following. Did you tell the defendant or anybody else at that meeting that it was okay to follow someone from a distance?
No.
Was your information to them or instructions to them not to follow anyone at all?
Basically, they see suspicious activity or suspicious behavior to call 911 non-emergency dispatch.
All right. And you were asked about the defendant's role as the coordinator being the liaison. That is, I think you said that if people contact him, then he would then contact you.
Yes, as it relates to possible more training or presentations, stuff like that.
All right. To your memory, did the defendant ever contact you on behalf of someone else after the meeting?
He contacted me on the burglary
But that
after
was
the meeting.
because of his own interest, your understanding was?
Well,
Sustained.
Well, what was your understanding as to why he was contacting you about the burglary?
because of the neighborhood concerns regarding the burglary and a possible suspect being identified.
What instructions did you give the defendant about being the coordinator as it relates to the block captains? Did he have a role in organizing block captains?
Yes, the neighborhood watch coordinator has a responsibility for block captains and recruiting block captains.
And what was he supposed to do with the list of captains that he recruited?
And getting them engaged in the program and kind of assigning a block to each block captain.
And was he supposed to contact you in reference to the block captains?
Yes, I did have some kind of communication asking about the sign-up list that he had put up that day during the presentation.
And did this defendant ever contact you about a list of block captains or who he had recruited?
No.
Thank you, ma'am.
Reed Cross?
Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. May Ms. Doraville be excused? Thank you very much. You are excused. Call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please call Mr. Donald O'Brien.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. O'Brien, if you would, please give us the spelling of your last name, sir.
Capital O, apostrophe, capital B, R-I-E-N.
Mr. O'Brien, who is the president of the Homeowners Association at the Retreat of Twin Lakes?
I am.
And how long have you been that president?
Since 2011, September.
You know the defendant in this case, George Zimmerman?
Yes, I do.
Would you please tell me the circumstances under which you first met the defendant?
Okay, I took over as president the third Tuesday in September, and the next day I got an email about he was going to start the heck's it called? Neighborhood Watch, and they needed somebody to put out papers. He wanted to get it out to the whole neighborhood, so I said, well, since I'm retired, I'll do it for you. So then that Thursday night, we had the meeting, and that's when I actually met George.
Had you before that heard anything about that turned out to be related to potentially Neighborhood Watch?
The answer is yes or no.
Yes.
Tell me the circumstances of that, please.
My neighbor,
Your Honor,
Okay.
I'm not certain the witness is clear about what we are clear about.
Okay. You cannot testify as to what somebody told you.
Let me ask it a different way. When you met the defendant at the Neighborhood Watch, were you already aware of how long this has sort of been in progress?
no, sir.
Okay. When you went to that first Neighborhood Watch meeting, did you become aware of whether or not there had already been police contact?
Not before the meeting. At the meeting, I found that out, yes.
Okay. And what did you find out from the defendant?
Excuse me?
What did you find out from the defendant at that meeting?
I found out that there was evidently a course he went through the Sanford Police, and he evidently did everything he had to do to start a Neighborhood Watch.
Okay. So up to that point, had that had anything to do or been run through the HOA?
No, it's a totally separate from the HOA. We had nothing to do with it whatsoever.
So he had done that on his own?
Yes, sir.
Did you go to that meeting and attend the presentation?
Yes, I did.
And was Ms. Dorival there to conduct that?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me, at best you can, your takeaway from the presentation as to Neighborhood Watch program.
Okay, well, it started out, he introduced everybody, and then they told us how it worked. They put out a sign-up sheet for anybody that wanted to be a block captain. These were people who were going to, just watch. If they see something, they would notify the police.
Was there ever any discussion about what should not be done by Neighborhood Watch people?
Yes.
Let me object again. His testimony will be hearsay.
Actually, it's not being offered necessarily for truth, it's just to show his understanding of the program.
He could testify as to what his understanding is, what his takeaway was.
Then I would then suggest irrelevancy if he's not offering for the truth of the matter asserted, what's its relevance?
Overruled.
Mr. Bryan, the question is sort of, what did you understand the Neighborhood Watch program to be about, and more specifically even not about?
It was about, everybody was supposed to watch out for their neighbors. If they seen something suspicious, stay away, call the police.
There was this issue of block captains and coordinator you mentioned.
Yes.
Talk to me about this sign-up process and what you learned about that.
George had a sheet there, and anybody, after it was over, said anybody would wanted to be involved in, as far as being a Neighborhood Watch block captain, to sign the sheet.
And did people sign the sheet?
Yes, they did.
And were any of them ever block captains, to your knowledge?
No.
As far as the coordination of the program, who was assigned or assumed that duty?
George.
Tell me how that happened, please.
Well, he went to the police. He got this whole thing started, so it was his program, so he was running it.
I object to hearsay because this person has no independent...
Okay, your objection's hearsay. Response.
He's telling me what the defendant told him.
Okay, he could testify as to what the defendant told him, but anything else would be hearsay.
So again, Mr. O'Brien, as it relates to your understanding of how it is the defendant got to be in charge of this, as it were, Tell me what it is that you learned and know from both him and your position.
Say that one more time for me, please.
That was really long, wasn't it? I want to know how it is, from your knowledge, from what the defendant told you, how it is the defendant came to be, as you put it, in charge of this.
Because he went to the police and he wanted to start a neighborhood watch, and I was told, and the board was told that, you know, anybody can do that. Anybody living in the neighborhood can do this, and it has nothing to do with the HOA. It's a totally separate thing.
Was there a person sort of appointed to be the contact or the committee chair as it relates to Neighborhood Watch by the HOA?
Yes.
And this was during your term as president?
Yes.
Who was that person?
George Zimmerman.
And how did that happen?
Well, we came up with the plan that if anything happened, if you had to call the police or you knew of an incident, we would get a hold, they would let George know, and he would put out an email blast about it.
And how was it decided that the defendant would be the person to get notified to put out the email? Was there anybody else who wanted to?
No.
What is the parking committee?
A parking committee,
Grounds of relevance, Your Honor.
Relevance.
If you're allowed to answer, I think I can establish that.
I'll give you some leeway.
What is the parking committee?
parking committee was just people that went around and tried to enforce people parking illegally, parking in front of fire hydrants, things like that.
And was the defendant also on the parking committee?
Yes, Mr. Zimmerman.
Your Honor, grounds of relevance.
Overruled.
I'm sorry, could you finish your answer, please?
Okay. Mr. Zimmerman, one night at the meeting, volunteered to help me out. I asked for volunteers, and he said, sure, I'll help you out. So he got on the parking committee with me.
And tell me again what the function of that committee is?
It was just to try to enforce parking laws, because at that time we didn't have, it was the development, we didn't have an agreement with Sanford Police to come in there and patrol and do anything. So we were more or less did the parking thing ourselves.
And did that involve looking in front, and what does it involve?
It just involved if you see a car parked in the yellow, or you seen a car parked against a stop sign, or a car parked in front of a fire hydrant, we would try to give warnings. We gave them 3 warnings before we had the car towed.
We've heard about the series of break-ins, or a series of break-ins that occurred just before and around the time of the formation of the Neighborhood Watch Committee. You familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did there come a time in 2012 when someone got arrested in connection with those things?
Yes, sir.
Were you actually there for part of that?
I was talking to the gentleman that did the break-in before he did the break-in, but I had left before he actually did the break-in.
Okay. And when you say you were talking to him, did the person turn out to actually live in the community?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about how he got caught?
Sure. It was on a weekday afternoon. I had stucco people in there fixing stucco on our walls. And I was down there talking to the guys to see how progress was going. And this gentleman walked down the street, who we've seen numerous times before. He just stood in the middle of the street talking to us. And then I left, and I guess he walked off. And then it came back later and broke into the home, and the stucco guys were sitting there watching.
And did they follow him and call the police?
All of a sudden, a truck came up, picked him up, and he was gone. They had no idea.
Okay. When you learned of the arrest of that person, Tell me what you did.
I sent George a text right after I found out the arrest was made and said, "Hey, George, let everybody know that they caught a person in here involved in the break-ins we've been having, and he's under arrest."
And did you let him know how it was that the person got caught?
Yes, I did.
Tell me how you did that.
I sent an email out.
Okay. And tell me what you said.
I said the Stucco guys were responsible for following this person. They were sitting on a hill across the street at Coles, and they just happened to see the guy walking down the street heading into development, so they followed him to development at a safe distance and seen where he went, and they called the police.
Did you give any praise out to those people?
Yes, I did.
Did you have any subsequent interaction? And let me back up. Give me the time frame on about when that happened.
I'm thinking, oh gosh, I would have to guess. I couldn't even.
Okay. Let me ask you this, just in general terms. Was it close in time to the shooting that's related in this case?
Yeah, I think it was a couple months before that. Yes.
And did you have any interaction with the defendant after that as it relates to the praise and things for the Stucco people?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Very well. So from what you're aware of it, George Zimmerman helped out with the Neighborhood Watch, correct?
Yes, sir.
Sort of took charge of it? In
Yes.
effect? Okay. And even helped out on the parking committee, right?
Yes, sir.
When you were just now sort of new into the position as the president of the HOA at that point, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did it seem strange to you that somebody would be willing to help you?
No.
Okay. Any concern that he was willing to do the Neighborhood Watch that nobody else was willing to do?
No.
You think that that's a positive thing for your neighborhood?
My personal opinion,
Neighborhood Watch.
Neighborhood Watch, what do I think of it?
Yeah.
I don't think we needed it, no.
Oh, okay. You did acknowledge that there were a rash of burglaries in the neighborhood where you were, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You also mentioned something concerning the parking committee, that the Sanford PD, they don't normally patrol your neighborhood?
They came through, but not on a regular basis because it was a private community until we signed the paperwork where they would patrol constantly.
Right, so back then, let's say February, let's say January or December of 2011, January 2012, had that been signed yet?
No, sir.
So Sanford PD wasn't doing as routine a patrol through the neighborhood as they were after you signed the agreement, correct? Or are they still not doing much?
No, they do plenty.
Okay.
I mean, I have no problem.
All right. But back then, when the Neighborhood Watch was started, Sanford and the Sanford PD and the HOA didn't have this written agreement in place?
Correct.
The written agreement then allows Sanford Police Department actually into the community?
Well, they came in on any emergency. Any emergency
Correct.
calls, they were definitely there, but I don't know how much they actually patrolled it. I mean, I was retired, so I would see them there, coming through on a day on bikes or whatever, so I really didn't see any difference before we signed the paper and after I signed the paper, as far as patrolling.
But the purpose for signing the paper was to increase the patrols in the neighborhood?
Yeah, and to enforce parking laws and stuff, like people parked up against the signs where before they couldn't do anything about that, and we signed the paper. Now, if we call them and say, hey, somebody's parked illegally, they can come in and give them a ticket now.
Got it. So they now can come in on more than just emergency basis?
Correct.
Great. So, the one incident where the guy You were chatting with him, and then he burglarized the place. I guess the question is, these stucco guys, they actually saw that from outside the neighborhood?
They were having lunch. It wasn't the same day. The day we talked to them,
Right.
okay, this was days later, they were sitting across the street at the Coles having lunch, and they just happened to see him walking down the street, and they said, hey, that's the guy that broke into the home.
Okay, so they actually noticed who it was?
Yes, sir.
And describe him for me,
Describe who?
the person who did the burglary.
He was, you tell me what you want to know about him. He
Whatever
was,
you remember.
okay, I would say he was like 17 or 18 years old.
Sure.
He was black.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else? Seemed like a real nice guy. I mean, he talked to us. I mean, I would have never thought anything of him.
So these stucco guys, did they notice him, did they see him break into the place and then notice him later? Or tell me about that.
No, they actually seen him coming out of the place and jump in a truck.
All right. And it was a few days later that they noticed him. And did you say that they followed him?
From a distance, yes.
Sure. Okay.
They followed him to see where he lived, and then they called the police.
Great. Can I just have a moment, Your Honor? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Mr. Ryan, Mr. Mayor just asked you about the stucco people following this individual and being responsible for him getting caught. And that was what you remarked earlier. I think you said you sent out a praise email type thing?
Yes.
Okay. Juxtapose that with your understanding of what a neighborhood watch person would do as far as following. What's your understanding of that?
So I could hardly...
Should a neighborhood watch person follow?
Should the neighborhood watch person follow him?
Right.
Your Honor, both hearsay and improper opinion evidence.
He can understand as to what, he was at the meeting, as to what his understanding was of the neighborhood watch presentation.
Since day one, the neighborhood watch, it was said at that meeting and said every meeting we had after that, do not get close to anybody, stay at a safe distance, and call 911 and let the police handle it.
So under any circumstances where you get to follow somebody,
No.
that is nonetheless what the stucco guys did and
Correct.
catching somebody. Thank you. No other questions, John?
Just very quickly, so when you say don't follow, then you say safe distance, what you're really saying is, if you're going to follow somebody to keep your eye on them to report to the police, just make sure you do it safely, correct?
That is what the police told us.
Yeah. And like you just said, do it at a safe distance to protect yourself, right?
Correct.
You want to make sure that you maintain your own personal safety when you're trying to help out, whether it be neighborhood watch or just the cops in general?
Correct.
Okay,
Because
thanks.
we are not police.
Sure, but you can be the eyes and ears of police, right?
Correct.
Thanks.
Any redirect?
Understand it. Don't follow. Is that what you said?
That's what I said.
Thank you.
Thank you. May Mr. O'Brien be excused?
No, Judge.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. You are excused.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 12 o'clock. I'm going to send you back into the jury room to go for lunch. During lunch, please do not discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anybody else. Do not read or listen to any radio, television, or newspaper reports about the case. Do not use any type of an electronic device to get on the internet to do any independent research about the case, people, places, things, or terminology, And do not read or create any emails, text messages, Twitters, tweets, blogs, or social networking pages about the case. Do I have your assurance that you will abide by these instructions? Okay, please put your notepads face down on the chair and follow Deputy Jarvis. And we'll be back at 1 p.m. And while they're doing that, everybody please be seated. Council, please approach for a moment. Be in recess until 1 p.m.